Hi, this is Don McLean, and you're listening to the Nothing Shocking Podcast.
Want to know what's going on in the world of music? Then tune in to the Nothing Shocking Podcast, a non-genre based, all-ages friendly rock and roll program. Join us weekly for interviews with all your favorite rock stars from the mainstream to the underground. You can find us at nothingshocking.libsyn.com or anywhere you download podcasts.
We're putting the band back together.
The numbers all go to 11.
I'm talking about bands that rock. Led Zeppelin. What about Sabbath? AC/DC. Motorhead.
Does that mean it's louder? Isn't it any louder?
Well, it's one louder, isn't it?
We're not worthy. We're not worthy.
Why don't you just make 10 louder and make 10 be the top number and make that a little louder?
These go to 11.
I get up off the ground and raise my head. Days like this, think I should be dead. One for Satan, two for me. Let's cheat the devil, it's fun, don't you agree?
Welcome to the Nothing Shocking Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jeff Untied, and with me in Dog Bowl Studios is
Coach Nez.
You can find the Nothing Shocking Podcast on Libsyn or any podcatchers. Like our Facebook page or follow us at Twitter at NoShockPod.
You can also find the Nothing Shocking Podcast on Rock Rage Radio every Sunday morning at 7 a.m. Central Time. Our sponsor is Ragged Records, located in downtown Rock Island, Illinois, and downtown Davenport, Iowa. We'd like to thank the Hong Kong Sleepover for allowing us to use their music for our intro and bumper ending. Tonight's guest is
Don McLean, the legendary singer-songwriter.
Promoting The Day the Music Died, the story of Don McLean's American Pie. Also promoting American Pie, a Fable, a children's book.
Yeah, and if you haven't watched that yet, it's streaming on Paramount Plus. Get out there and check it out. It's one of the best documentaries I've seen.
We had to pinch ourselves tonight. We interviewed Don McLean. Let's get right to it.
All right, good night.
Good night. Don, welcome to the Nothing Shocking Podcast. I'd like to introduce you, my co-host, Jeff Untied.
Don, it's an honor to have you on tonight.
Well, thank you for having me, and I hope I can answer your questions well.
I'm sure you will. Well, we're ecstatic to have you. Let's get right into it. In July of 2022, The Day the Music Died, the story of Don McLean's American Pie was released. Can you talk a little bit more about the origins and the blueprint it took to create this documentary?
That was the idea of a guy named Spencer Proffer, who just recently did a documentary about Elvis Presley's comeback special with Steve Binder, who is now in his 90s, and he was able to, interview him and go behind the scenes on. That's very interesting, and he's done many others. So he wanted to do this, and I wasn't sure it would be a good idea. But once I got into it, I began to realize things that I'd forgotten because I've answered questions about this song for so many years. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, I'm seeing film footage of periods of time in my life that I'm talking about. They did such a good job of finding this stuff and researching. And I realized one thing, and that is that it took me 10 years to write this song, which is the only time I ever thought that much about a song. There was the idea of Buddy Holly's death and his plane crash and everything were always on my mind from the time that I remember reading about it as a paper boy. And the whole story, therefore, is in that movie.
Yeah.
Very good. In order to create an in-depth documentary such as this, what was the duration? Do you remember how long it took from start to finish to get this thing done?
Yeah, it took about 2 years, and I did several interviews, and Mark Moorman is the man that really did the job of making the movie. It was Proffer's idea, but it was Mark Moorman who did the work and created all the pieces of the film and did a beautiful job of editing and everything. And it took about 2 years, and it was just about the time we started making plans for a whole bunch of different things. A children's book that was also through Spencer, a bookazine which we did that was through him, and there'll be another children's book on Vincent, I think, this year. And so everything he said he was going to do, he did. And the documentary, he even had this documentary played on both coasts to qualify it for an Academy Award. And it made the long list. It did not make the short list, but it was also up for one of 5 documentaries up for an MTV award. I lost to Selena Gomez. So what do you think about that?
Oh, hey.
Anyway, it's amazing how far the thing went, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I think it's one of the better documentaries. I mean, I've watched a lot of documentaries over the years, but I thought it was really good and very well made.
Great. Well, I think it's going to be around a long time. You know,
yes.
I think people will see it for many, many years.
Can you talk a little bit about that? I think towards the end of the video, it was a 50th anniversary tour where you played at the Surf Ballroom in Clear Lake, Iowa. You went and played live there. Had you ever played there before, or was that your first time? Or can you talk a little bit about that experience?
Yes, I had played the Surf Ballroom once before, maybe, 20 years ago. I'm not a person that made a living, talking about my connection to Buddy Holly. It's just not something that I wanted to do. I had many, many things to do, and there are people that do that. You know, that's all they ever do. Mm-hmm. But I'm really, really happy with what American Pie did for the name of Buddy Holly and the music of Buddy Holly, which I think, if you look at this artist, he was 22 years old when he died, and he probably cut 60 or 80 tracks or something. He wrote almost all the songs he sang. Yeah. And every single song was a hit record. Mm-hmm. I mean, whether it was Rave On or Think It Over or, That Makes It Tough or whatever the song was, it's a hit. So the guy was a genius. There's no other word for him. Richie Valens was also very talented. He was only 17 years old. And he already had a few hit records, and he had that nasty Stratocaster guitar sound, which really turned me on a lot. But he also did Donna, which was a very haunting song. And he was so young that he wouldn't even go shopping for clothes without his mother with him.
Yeah.
Wow.
He was a baby. He was a baby, and he ended up on tour at 17 and getting killed. And his sister's in that. And she was about 5 years old at the time and tells her story. And I insisted that she be allowed to tell her story. What was it like in Richie Valens' home when this whole terrible event happened? And she was very powerful in describing them.
Yes.
That part of the documentary was very powerful to watch. For you to sit and listen to her talk about it, how did it affect you listening to her, take account of how things would happen in their household after the accident?
Well, the idea of somebody yelling at her, your brother got killed, as she's going in to see her mother, it happened to my cousin. I have a cousin whose mother had been ill, and he was coming to home, and some kid said, "Hey, your mother died." This is kind of very sensitive thing that happens sometimes to people. It's awful. And so that was a shock, and she went inside, and then, of course, the reality was that it actually had happened. But I was right in the middle of the reality of it, which one more aspect of this song, which was the bringing her into my life for that moment to tell me that.
Yeah,
very much so. The day the music died is unique in the sense that it touched upon your life, the various inspirations of American Pie, the song itself. That's a ton of information to put into a 90-minute time frame as far as a documentary goes. It was beautifully done. Can you talk a little bit more about the content that didn't make it on the documentary?
Well, I think I contributed one very important thing, and that was that after about the third interview, we were at my home in Maine, and I said, you guys have done such beautiful work. I'd seen some of the rushes, but I said, you're missing the whole point. People want to know what the lyrics are about.
Yeah.
So I said, I'm going to take the guitar, and I'm going to start with a long, long time ago and tell you exactly what I can remember. And I did. And afterwards, I remembered, there were a bunch of other things I didn't say that I could have, but a lot of it I got in there because I was just having a great time. I was doing this for myself. This was the second album I had made. I'd made Tapestry. The Tapestry album got me well known all over the country. I was an FM favorite, underground radio favorite. So I was instantly famous because of Tapestry in the United States as an up-and-coming singer and songwriter.
Yeah.
Then, the record company went out of business, and I was not going to get a chance to make the second record. So then United Artists came in, and I was already well into making that American Pie album when the company Media Arts went bankrupt, and United Artists came in and took it over, and so I finished the record, and they loved American Pie, and they gave me a lot of money, and I was able to move my mother out of her apartment and back into the house that we used to have, and I was able to do a lot of things, and immediately the shortened version of the song became number one. So you can imagine from being totally out of business with the record company going under after my first record to being number one the next year. I mean, that's show business, you know what I mean?
Very much so. I want to touch upon your book, American Pie, a Fable, the children's book, that is, parallels your life as a young boy. Can you give our listeners an insight to this unique and creative endeavor? I mean, how did the idea come to you creating a children's book?
This is another idea that Spencer Proffer had, and they interviewed me, and his wife, Judy Proffer, worked with me, and a wonderful artist whose name I cannot recall at the moment, and they created this idea. But anyway, there will also be, and it did a beautiful job. The drawings are really, really very lovely, and the artwork for the Vincent book, which is the same kind of thing, will be very beautiful too. This same man will do those drawings. It has done those drawings. So we're going to have a number of these children's books, but that was again his idea to do this thing, and his wife is very, very talented, and used the interviews with me to create this wonderful. She did a book with Graham Nash too. I think it was called Our House, or after one of the songs from one of his songs.
Yeah, very good. As far as the second children's book that you've alluded to, when can your fans anticipate the second book to be released?
That will definitely happen sometime this year. A number of things are going on which people might find interesting if they like my music. Number one is that I have 15 albums that I'm re-releasing on vinyl and CD.
Nice.
Through a company that Kurt Webster in Nashville, who represents me, put a deal together with these people, and they are coming out with I have a new album of all new songs called American Boys, which is coming out in February, I think in March, late March sometime, but all the artwork is done, everything is ready to go on that. And then they're going to re-release on vinyl and CD an additional 7 albums. And they're going to do a volume 2 of the Christmas remastered and remixed series for next Christmas. So there'll be 2 of those. And the following year, they're going to do 7 more albums into vinyl. We're talking about albums like Chain Lightning that had Crying on it, Believers that had Castles in the Air on it, all sorts of the Western album I made, a children's album I made, all these different things. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Oh, so exciting.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite parts in the documentary was when they were talking to producer Ed Freeman, and he was going through the backing band and kind of how some of those guys were selected. And that part where I think it was Paul Griffin was playing piano.
Yeah.
And he that was just really cool because it kind of made it in a whole new light that I hadn't really heard it in before.
Well, they were screaming about a lack of diversity, as they always do. And, of course, in our case, we had diversity because we had the main man was a black man who made all the difference. But unfortunately, God rest his soul, he passed away. I would have given anything to have him be interviewed because he was on a lot of records, not just me. He was on all kinds of records. And he was very, very brilliant. And the album was really quite strange because here I am doing a song about Vincent van Gogh, okay? And it's a sensitive song.
Yeah.
And if I had been a different kind of artist, that would have been the dumbest, that would have been like a Mommy Dearest of songs. That would have been the worst damn song, and the same thing with American Pie. Here I am making this crazy language up to tell some kind of a story about rock and roll. And that thing was just laying there. I mean, those guys couldn't play that song no matter what. We worked on that thing for several months. And every time I said, man, this is a polka. I'm not Lawrence Welk, okay? I want rock and roll, okay? Yeah. And none of those guys knew. And the thing is that Ed Freeman, God bless him, as I recall it, we never had a rehearsal with Paul Griffin. He came that day, and he sang. He got at the piano and rocked the hell out of that song, and everybody suddenly could play the song because they had the groove they needed. They needed. They had the direction. He was the leader on that whole thing.
He had a very unique piano style. Can you talk a little bit more about working with that type of style of pianist?
Well, I dig that's a gospel stride kind of piano. It's like people who would play with Bessie Smith, who would play with Muddy Waters or whatever. He had a style that you didn't really need a band with a guy like him. If you had a bass and this cat on the and you were playing guitar and he was playing piano, you would feel like you were hearing a band because he was covering one end of the, both hands were working, the high and the low end of the piano, and pushing and pumping, very much a rhythm instrument, and all those fills and stuff. And what he said, I shall never forget it. He said, man, when I heard your acoustic guitar in my headphones, man, I knew what I had to do. Because I play the acoustic guitar hard. I was solo for 20 years all over the world, and I have my guitars set up with medium strings like a bluegrass player almost. And my guitars are loud, even when they weren't mic'd or even when they didn't have pickups in them. With pickups, they're huge. And so that's why we can play stadiums or anywhere, because it's not a wimpy thing. So he heard this thing, and he said, I knew what I had to do. And he just jumped it was him and me, just jumping all over this thing.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah.
Jeff, you got the next one?
But I got to say, to everybody's credit, Rob Stoner played an unforgettable bass part. And the drummer was fabulous, and I think David Spinoza played guitar. Everybody really played great, once they knew what they had to do.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Well, another part that was kind of fascinating was when he was talking about all the taking and splicing the different vocal parts together to make the song, and it got me thinking, like, and back then I know that all the tapes were, they had to tape them together, and there's so much margin for possible error, but it's just amazing. It's stuff that they were able to pull out. Like if they would have had Pro Tools back then, would this song have been 20 minutes long instead of 8?
Exactly.
Well, you agonized over every edit. Because if you had a 1 micron, 1 millimeter, half a millimeter off, you would hear that edit.
Yeah.
Okay, it had to be seamless, and Ed was absolutely fastidious about that. And he had lots of edits in that song, so you don't want to hear those things whipping by every time you hear the thing, because you'll never ever hear the song. If you hear the edits, you'll always hear the edits. But he used to piss me off because a lot of times I didn't think an edit was necessary, but I said, you're just doing that because you're the producer and you want to show you have a function, but you're really not needed to do that. And so we argued about that quite a bit, but he came up with a wonderful result, and that's really all that counts.
He did touch upon the complexity of the vocal mix for American Pie. Talk a little bit more about the complexities of it all.
Well, that's where he and the engineer Tom Fly, who, funnily enough, I knew Tom Fly already. When I walked in the studio, I looked at this guy, and he had like rosy cheeks and like shoulder length hair, and he was, this really high energy guy. I said, "Man, I know you." And it turns out that he was in a group called Lothar and the Hand People. And they were, in 1964, they made a couple of records. They were out of Boulder, Colorado. They made a couple of records on Capitol Records. But I met them at the house of a guy named John Emlyn in Mamaroneck. And John Emlyn was a big promoter of me in high school. He really loved my singing and songwriting. I didn't do much songwriting. He liked my singing. And he actually put up some money to put me in concert in 1964 at the local Jewish Center in Westchester. Nice. And I was at his house, and I met these guys that he had this group with, and Tom was there. So that was 64. Now, 6 years later, I'm in the studio, and who do I walk into? With Tom Fly, who'd been in that group. And what they did with the sound was very interesting. Ed was very good at that. He would use delay. I don't know if you know what delay is. Mm-hmm. It's a kind of it sounds like chamber echo, but it's just even more, I don't know, it's not quite the same. He would use, I think they had a chamber in that studio at the record plant, so he'd use that. And then he'd what we call slap. Slap is like what you hear on those Sun records. It's real cheap sound. It's like Johnny Cash singing Ballad of the Teenage Queen. That's slap on that sound, and that's cheap sound, but it's a wonderful sound. So he would mix all that together, and it would give this watery kind of ethereal sound to my voice. He was also very focused on that.
Oh, fantastic.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that Pete Seeger? He was featured in there where you toured with him, and can you talk a little bit more about how he influenced you?
Pete Seeger was a model for me. Pete Seeger and Josh White were the two models I had. There were people who played. What I liked about Seeger was that he had his banjo and his guitar on his back. And he went on stage and he told his stories and he sang his songs and he packed up his guitar and banjo and walked out, And that's basically what I did for probably 25 years until I began adding musicians because I wanted to do something different. And Josh White, I loved because he arranged, his songs were arranged with this magnificent and unique guitar style that he invented, which was so powerful, and that he could make his guitar sound like a horn section, just by with horn stabs, with the way he would use his right hand, all 5 of his fingers at the same time, And he was just, I can't say enough about Josh White. He was way ahead of his time. He was probably a national treasure. And I'm going to get a chance to put him and make a statement that will induct him into the South Carolina Musicians Hall of Fame in April.
Nice.
And I'm so happy they asked me to do that, because I have plenty to say about this hero. He was ahead of Martin Luther King, ahead of everybody else, unafraid to stand up to there were real white supremacists in the 40s.
Yeah.
He wrote a great song called Uncle Sam Says about military segregation, and he sang it to Roosevelt. So he was a real good friend of the Roosevelts. His brother, Bill, was Eleanor Roosevelt's road manager, if you will, driver, whatever, for many, many years. And so, this is a very important man.
Oh.
And so that's what they were to me. This was what I wanted to be, and as I got along, I began to always kept that, but I wanted to do more than that. I wanted to work with other musicians, and I wanted to. I got in the studio basically, and I started having basically what happened to Brian Wilson and the Beach Boys and everything. Suddenly, I became in love with the power of arranging, or what I could do was, if you listen to a song like The Statue, which is on the Primetime album, which will be released this year on vinyl, and you hear the string arrangement, which is like it's just a whole different thing. It's like a Wagnerian thing that I dreamed up. I couldn't play it myself, but there's a guy named Kenny Asher who won an Oscar for a song that he wrote with Paul Williams called Evergreen. And he was a guy I knew for years before. We played at a nightclub together in Lenox, and I brought him in, and he did these marvelous arrangements. So you can hear I was going beyond the ability that I had to play the stuff,
Wanted to bring this back to the American Pie album, the cover. It was alluded to in the documentary is the Captain America thumb. Can you just talk about the brainchild of that album cover and who thought of painting the thumb?
Alan Livingston ran Media Arts Records. Alan Livingston was one of the last really great record men. He knew how to create an image for an artist. And if you look at the Tapestry cover, and then you look at the following American Pie cover, you see that he was developing an image for me. There was a vibe and an image that he was developing. He was the man who single-handedly transformed Capitol Records into the Leviathan, the monster, really, that it became in the 1960s. He signed the Beatles, he signed the Beach Boys, he had the Kingston Trio, he had Frank Sinatra, and all those cats came over there to Capitol. And when his career was over, he decided he wanted to have one more thing, and he formed this Media Arts film and records company. And so he knew what to do. So he sent me to this guy named George Whiteman, who was a fashion photographer. And when I got there, it was right out of, I don't know if you remember the movie, the TV show, What About Love That Bob, back in the 50s. It starred Bob Cummings, and he was a fashion photographer. And all the girls would come in and hug Bob. Oh, Bob, it's so great to see you. They'd be in bikinis and stuff in California. Well, that's what this guy was like. He was like Andre Dudane. I don't know if you've ever heard of him. He photographed all these nude models in the sand dunes and stuff. Mm-hmm. And he had a big Rolls Royce out front. And I walked in there, and a gorgeous model came in and did the same thing. Oh, Georgie, and so go away. I'll see you later. This kind of thing. So he said to me, "Okay, Don, I'm going to paint your thumb." I said, "Okay." And that's what happens.
That's it, huh? That's the story.
That's what happened.
That's awesome. Well, I was going to ask you a little bit about, in the documentary, they go in depth into some of the cover versions of American Pie. And, there's a long list of artists, but, Garth Brooks is probably one of the biggest ones there that they feature. And one of the newer ones, Jade Bird, was incredible. And for me, Home Free was amazing because it's part of what I do. I sing in a barbershop style chorus, and so that was really, really cool. But can you talk from a songwriter perspective of, when you hear some of these other people take on your song, just what that means to you?
Well, anytime, like for example, Elvis Presley did "And I Love You So," and he did it every night for the last year of his life.
Yeah.
And he was on the last album he made, which was a live album. It was the last track on the last album. And if you hear him do that, and you hear me do it, or you hear Como do it, you hear the talent and what he brought to a song. You can talk all you want about it, but if you hear it, you get the idea that there's a whole other level of musical ability and singing ability. Elvis Presley was a wonderful singer. He sang in tune. He had a beautiful vibrato. He used his voice in hundreds of different ways. It was never the same thing. He had many different voices, and of course, he was this beautiful man, and he was and he unfortunately wedded himself to this high energy act, which he couldn't do anymore, which hence the chemical help he needed, which ruined his health. Mm-hmm. And but he was known by the Colonel originally discovered him, called him the atomic singer. So he was he wouldn't just stand there like Sinatra. Everybody else just stood there, like in front of the microphone. But not Elvis. Elvis changed everything that way.
I wanted to take this maybe to a question you've probably answered a million times, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
Thank you.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but I just have to.
Yeah.
Sure.
I can't help it, but, American Pie is the song that's going to be there till the very end of days. Yeah. It'll be played till the very end of days, and it'll be covered a million more times.
Yeah.
For you, the man that created this song, what does it feel like for you to know that this song will stand the test of time until mankind is gone?
Yeah.
I don't know how to answer that question, but I'm sure that there's going to be an artificial intelligence version of Don McLean singing this, so I won't be gone. I'll be right there, and along with a bunch of other things that I've done as well as they're going to do. I mean, people do not want to let go of the past. Let's face it. Ever since video came in and before, we think we can look back and see Elvis Presley on the, one of the TV shows he did, Sullivan, or the Dorsey programs, and that's like 75 years ago.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
But it's only because we think we can reach back. And we've gotten accustomed to that. So I just don't think they'll ever let me go, or let the song go, or let Vincent go, or let anything go. That's just how it's going to be. I mean, there's not a whole lot to take its place.
No, there is not. No, there isn't. I want to ask you one more question. I guess maybe this is not a question, but I just want to. This is something that I've wanted to say to you since we've scheduled this interview. Is that what American Pie meant to me? Is that I went when I did my undergrad back in the '90s. I went to school at Western Illinois University off of Highway 67 in the middle of nowhere in Illinois.
Highway 67, yeah, man.
And there was a little bar. American Pie was the last song to be played before they closed the bar down.
Right.
Yes.
And it's a song that will ever be entrenched in my head because of those experiences as a college kid.
They did it in Northern Iowa, too.
So, but we're out of our allotted time for the evening. Is there anything that we left off tonight that you would like to plug or promote?
No. you'll hear about it. There'll be a lot of publicity about it. I'm probably going to. I've been asked to testify in Congress about publishing, so you may see that in the news. And also, there'll be, I think, some other sort of high-profile stuff coming down the road to talk about some of these things we've talked about, the album releases. And there's a song I wrote called "The Ballad of George Floyd," which is on my new album, American Boys, and they'll probably want to talk about that. I have plenty of coverage these days, but I am very, I'm very sort of I feel kind of lost in the world today because there's nothing that is out there that I think is particularly beautiful. I think one of the things I like about Taylor Swift is that she works very hard at being beautiful and that and trying to do things that are sensitive and fun for her audience and not dirty and low down, which everything seems to be dirty and low down. A little of that goes a long way. I don't really want a steady diet of dirty and low down. I'm really tired of it. So I admire her for that, and you can imagine what this lady has to go through. She's got to look camera ready all the time. Yeah. She's always got to have a new outfit every 2 seconds. I don't know what she does with all her clothes. I mean, she has a lot of houses. But, all the shoes and everything, she always got to be ready. And then the show is this monster show, and it's been such a wonderful success for her. But it's a lot for a little lady to have on her shoulders, and I wish her well. But I think she's doing something that's good for kids to see rather than the disgusting stuff that's out there most of the time.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. We're going to be releasing this episode this weekend, so when we get this all cleaned up, Jeff, the editing wizard over here, will get it all put out, and we'll get it to your publicist immediately.
I have two things to say.
Yes.
One is that Joe Walsh, the guitar player, said a very funny thing. He said, "I'd rather be 20 in the 70s than 70 in the 20s." Yeah. And I want to say how much I agree with that. And the other thing that I came up with is that, mind is a terrible thing to waste. But as they're against, most environmentalist people are against because they think waste is a terrible thing to mind.
Well said. Don, it was an honor.
What an honor, yes. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity. We appreciate it.
Okay, boys. You have a nice time now.
Take care.
You too.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
For our listeners, here's a new track from Cindy Louise. She's an up-and-coming artist working with Devo Graphic Music Agency. Check out her song, What You Made Me, from her new EP.
The world is not fair.